Hello everyone, I'm Dr. Anand Padmanabhan and I'm the Dean at Daksha Fellowship as well as the School of Law at Sai University, Chennai, a greenfield university coming up near Mahabalipuram. My work has largely focused on issues relating to technology law and policy, particularly on matters of regulation of emerging technologies. Today, we live in a world where data powers a lot of innovation, where data allows for convergence of the physical with the digital, what business analysts call the phygital space, as well as helps governments think about delivery of public goods and services. One case in point being Aadhaar and the use of biometric identities. So, in multiple ways, data powers the economy, it powers our daily lives, and it powers our interaction with the state. Therefore, data protection and the way we think about the privacy of such informational data sets becomes absolutely crucial. So, speaking about data protection, I think the easiest way to handle it is to divide it into the following parts. The first is to look at the various sources of protection. The second, to look at how globally this matter has been addressed, even if in brief. Then to look at what India is doing in this particular regard, the kind of incorporation of some of the global principles into our domestic jurisprudence and policy making exercises, what in particular are the protections afforded to the citizen, what is the mechanism, regulatory architecture out there to protect data, themes such as data localization, exception to these rights, and finally, of course, the way forward. So let me begin with the source of rule making when it comes to privacy and data protection. So these are two very different concepts, really. Privacy is connected much more with a broader aspect of our existence, our private spaces, for instance, spatial privacy, what is going on in our daily lives, how we take decisions, and so on. And information is one part of our private lives. So you have this larger set called privacy, and within that, a subset called data protection. Another important distinction to be kept in mind is that privacy is also a constitutional concept. Data protection is associated much more in at least legal parlance as associated with regulation, be it regulation of businesses, regulation of state citizen interaction, or regulation of citizens and their data. I'll begin with the idea of privacy because one cannot understand data protection really without a reasonable insight into the idea of privacy. So, in the world that we live today, informational privacy is absolutely critical because it has a bearing on all other aspects of privacy as well. For instance, if I know your location cell tower information, I can then decide where you are spatially located based on that fact. If I know your Swiggy purchase order, I can then, based on that, decide about the kind of cuisine that you like. So, your decisions, your location, all other important aspects of your life can really be gauged increasingly through access to your digital footprints. It is in this context that the Indian Supreme Court in 2017 came out with a unanimous verdict in its nine-judge bench decision in Puttaswamy, Justice Puttaswamy retired versus Union of India. Of course, the case had a very interesting genesis to it, which was the fact that the then Attorney General of India, while defending the government's position on Aadhaar, the use of biometric identities, had taken an extreme position that the right to privacy is not a fundamental right in the Indian constitutional scenario. So the matter then went up on reference to a larger bench, and that is how the 2017 verdict came about. The court made it absolutely clear that informational privacy is a fundamental right, but of course, like most other fundamental rights, not absolute in its nature. So, what did the court then really say about the restrictions or exceptions to this right? The court, of course, reserved it to the wisdom of a legislative action in the future, the data protection regime that would come about. So the court did not step into matters of data protection in the technical sense in which we understand that term. However, it laid out that whatever interference or intervention into the domain of informational privacy by the state or even by private actors for that matter, it all needs to meet what we call the triple test. So the first is that of legality. Is there a legal action which supports the exception, which supports the intervention into informational privacy? The second question is that of necessity and the existence of a legitimate state interest in connection with that. So, is it necessary to intrude into the private domain, particularly on matters of informational privacy? And if so, why? So the court laid out certain situations on account of which such intrusion could materialize, primary of which being, of course, national security and law enforcement. But in addition to that, the court highlighted various state interests, such as the protection of state revenue. And this is particularly relevant for the Aadhaar case, so that could have been a reason why the court specifically mentioned it. The creation of knowledge databases for the purpose of research, for the purpose of governance, and so on. So you have legality, then you have the existence of a legitimate state interest, but it is not sufficient to stop here because there is a third element, and which is the most critical of elements, that of proportionality. So, is the state action which may be justifiably advanced on account of some legitimate state interest backing it still a proportionate one? And that is a completely separate question. And there it is incumbent on the court to examine whether less restrictive means could have been pursued to meet the same objective. So the court is basically indulging in a balancing exercise at this stage. The third proportionality stage involves a balancing exercise where the court balances the interest at hand or the mischief that the state is trying to protect against versus the exact nature of the measure deployed, the intervention or the restriction upon informational privacy, so to say, whether there exist certain alternatives to such mechanism which are less restrictive, less intrusive upon the informational privacy fundamental right that the court unanimously declared to be a part of part 3 of our constitution. And if it is found that the right balance has been struck, then the law or that particular state intervention would meet the triple test of legality, necessity or existence of a legitimate state interest, and proportionality. Now, the reason I mention all of this is that this foundational understanding of privacy has important, significant bearing on any data protection regime that we talk about. Ultimately, data protection is nothing but an extension of informational privacy, but with way more details laid out. Of course, the cultural context in which we operate becomes absolutely important, no denying that. And let us actually compare three different approaches to understand this part. So the first is the approach that the United States takes to data protection, which is largely a laissez-faire approach, but with a certain degree of protection in specific sectors such as healthcare, financial sector, and so on. So there are specific laws to address patient data, to address transaction data, to address consumer identity, but there is no general data protection law at a federal level. Now, of course, we are seeing various states pass privacy protection legislation, including, of course, most famously, California. That's one approach. And that approach is premised in a deep cultural acceptance of individual freedom, freedom of businesses, and protection against the state. So this is really the philosophical underpinnings of that kind of approach to data protection. Then you have the European approach, which is best captured currently under the General Data Protection Regulation. So if you look at GDPR, it is not greenfield legislation. It is brownfield legislation because Europe has had a long history of protecting informational privacy. And as often scholars point out, the history of this foray into informational privacy goes back to the Holocaust. So grim as its underpinnings are, the idea is that the GDPR is meant to protect individual dignity. So you move from a laissez-faire understanding of freedom in one jurisdiction to a focus around individual and community dignity in the context of Europe. And as a result of which, one could say that the most progressive data protection legislation today is the GDPR, primarily on account of the fact that it is not trying to balance innovation and freedoms. It is in fact saying that individual dignity is essential, that informational privacy is at the core of such dignity. And whatever you do, whether it's business, whether it's governance, you have to basically work around a protective framework which grants enforcement remedies to citizens. And of course, in the larger context of trans-border business operations, to all cross-border operations that involve the data of EU citizens. Finally, you have China. And as we know, China has a very different approach to its dealings with citizens, particularly when it comes to technology. Uh, Many technology companies are, in most ways, regulated through stringent approaches by the state. Therefore, China's foray has largely been the cyber security law of 2017, in which China essentially looks to safeguard the location of that data within Chinese shores. There is not much by way of protection of individual rights in that law. And the idea is that the state should be able to protect citizens, should be able to have access to data for its needs. So it's a very statist vision of what personal data means and how much of it the state can have access to and use for various purposes. So that's the Chinese model. Now, India has taken a slightly different approach from all this, and as evidenced by the Sri Krishna Committee report. So, this expert committee was set up in 2017, headed by Justice B.N. Sri Krishna. Uh, the idea was to figure out what would be the best mechanism towards data protection in India. So the committee started ground up by looking at what the normative framework in India would be, and it zeroed in on one particular principle, which is a free and fair digital economy. So there's a free, fair digital economy, and I think it all comes from the idea that India needs a robust digital economy. but at the same time, we also need to strike that balance. So it is built around balance as far as normative framing is concerned. But if you then go into the law that was proposed by the committee, as well as the law that has now been tabled before Parliament and is pending before the Joint Select Committee, you will notice that a large part of the law is deeply influenced by the GDPR framework, be it enforcement and penalties, be it the scope of rights, and so on. So, let me take a few minutes now to look into that framework. That framework, coming from GDPR and now in our PDP bill, is built around a few core principles of data protection. So, instead of getting into the provisions and the nuances, let me focus on those for today. So you have the principle of data minimization. Collect only as much data as you absolutely require to meet the purpose. There is a principle of purpose minimization. Collect only for the purposes for which you need the data and do not process the data for extraneous purposes. There is a principle of fair and lawful processing, which is an absolutely critical principle, with transparency on why and how your data is being processed, being passed on to the data subject upon his or her request, as well as at the time of collecting the data in the first instance. So you have the notice and consent framework that comes from this principle of fair and lawful processing. So you need to be intimated in advance. Right? Then there is the principle of data accuracy, that there is a bounden duty cast upon data fiduciaries, those who are gathering this data, collecting this data, passing it on to data processors, passing it on to other actors in the ecosystem. There is a bounden duty on such data fiduciaries to ensure that the data which is with it in its custody is accurate. And there should be then a right that flows from that responsibility, from that principle, given to the data subject to check on the accuracy and to request correction as it may be needed from time to time. There is a restriction on data retention. That is a critical principle. You will only hold the data for as long as required to meet the purposes, and once that purpose for data collection and processing has expired, has lapsed, you will not retain the data any further, except if there is a specific consent taken at a later point in time, or there is any particular law of the land that insists upon such data retention. Present bill of 2019 incorporates all these principles. But even before talking about this as a completely new development, we should be mindful of the fact that the sensitive personal data and information rules that apply already under the IT Act of 2000, those rules do provide in large measure for some of this. But what was missing and which is sought to be addressed? Actually, there are two things missing which are sought to be addressed. One is the absence of an enforcement mechanism. The SPDI rules, of course, talk about data minimization, purpose limitation, accuracy, data security. Many of these principles are already present in these rules, but there is no enforcement mechanism really. There is no regulator created. So that is one drawback. And the second critical feature of the data protection bill and GDPR and all of that is an acceptance of the fact that technology has moved miles beyond what it was in the year 2000 when the IT Act came into being, or even in the to 2009, 10, 11 when the rules under the IT Act were put in place. Technology has moved fast ahead, rapidly evolved beyond this period. And in what particular way? Primarily the rise of artificial intelligence. Now, if I may quickly take you through the various rights The rights are nothing but a mirror of all these principles. Just think about it that way. You have a right to access your data, to correct, to get it corrected or modified. You have a right to data portability. And this comes from a different value. It's not necessarily data protection values, it's much more keeping in mind competition values. Because if you do not have alternatives, there is no way you can do anything just apart from saying, look, I'll go to the regulator. But if you have alternatives, then the first choice is of course to move out of this particular solution provider to a different one, carrying your data with you, because often what you want to do is analytics based on that data, right? If I want quick results on a search engine, I would like that search engine to have the same data that the Google search engine has on me, and my search history. I may want to move it to a different search engine, though I'm unhappy with the Google search engine, to give an example. So data portability facilitates this whole exercise. Then, of course, there is a very controversial right, uh, the right to be de-indexed, as it is in the Indian context, the right to be hidden, to be forgotten, as they say in the European Union context. The reason I say de-indexed in the Indian context is simply because we do not have an absolute right to be forgotten. It is a much narrower right. The one right that is missing in the PDP bill and which is present in GDPR is, of course, the right against uh, profiling and automated decision making. Right. So currently, India is taking, from what I can gather, a very wait and see approach towards this, because a lot of the digital economy is powered by such automated decision making, whether it is looking into your credit rating and thereby deciding whether to extend a loan or not, or looking into your health data to decide whether you need an X-ray or not, and so on. So because of that, I think India has currently sort of decided not to give that as an enforceable right. But of course, if there is misuse of data, there are enough provisions, and we can always look into that regulatory architecture in greater detail in a subsequent lecture. Happy to discuss that. uh, Now coming to the final part, which I think needs a little bit of deliberation upon, the exceptions to the right. Finally, as we saw with the Puttaswamy context itself, the court had mentioned very clearly, even in the context of a fundamental right, you do not have an absolute right, there are exceptions. So clearly that would apply to data protection and informational privacy rights, which we just quickly outlined here. So the most important of such exceptions is, of course, the state exceptions favoring the state. And this is one of the controversial features of the current bill, which has come under a lot of criticism, clause 35 of the bill, on account of the fact that there are far less safeguards on access to personal data as laid out in the bill. Of course, one potential counter is that the data protection bill is only meant to lay out the principles on which you access data as well as protect data, and all other features such as the specific nature of the exceptions should be laid out in the rules, or it should be laid out in the specific sectoral legislations to protect data in the context of such sectors. Like tomorrow, if there is a health privacy law in India, that law should contain features relating to access to health data, be it for law enforcement, national security, or any other reason that is present in the current data protection law. Now, I think the first step is to understand the vocabulary of technology. That's something very unique to this particular area of data protection. What is data analytics? How do you go about using data to build a business or to develop a governance model? What are some of the challenges in the online world we live in? What are some of its key technical features? I think I would advise students to start from there, to really build their understanding of the vocabulary of technology and the digital space in particular. And then from there, move to Foundations of law or legal subjects, which are quite critical to develop that orientation, to fine tune it a lot better. And there in particular, I would begin with constitution. A lot of our constitutional debates are relating to technology today. Whether you take a case like Shreya Singhal or a case like Selvi versus State of Karnataka or something like Puttaswamy and the Aadhaar verdict. In all these cases, there is a fair presence of technology interacting with constitutional rights and fundamental freedoms. So that's the second point that I would really stress upon, to look at how these fundamental freedoms are playing out in an online setting. The third is, of course, to understand specific aspects of this technology law and policy making realm. And there, data becomes an important bucket. And data protection is not unfortunately offered as a course in many law schools, but there are so many certificate programs, there are so many other fellowships and programs of that kind which are looking at data protection. There are many avenues, of course. One is there are tech, media, and telecom law practice groups within law firms, and they are doing some of the most cutting edge work when it comes to data protection, digital media protection, and monetization, and so on. So there is a lot of work that law firms are now doing in this area. But law firms are not the only places where you can go after uh, building an expertise in data protection and tech law and policy more generally. You can look at consulting firms, which are again doing a lot of work relating to data. So all your big consulting firms have data security practices today. Those are largely cyber security practices, but they also have government advisory. They have other technology company advisory work where compliance with legislation such as the Data Protection Act or bill in our case, when it becomes an act, those become very important when offering consulting solutions, business consulting solutions to clients. Then you have policy consulting firms, which actually just give organizations a sense of what the current policies are, where the policy landscape is headed, and sometimes even convene, create knowledge platforms for them to be in conversation with the bureaucracy and so on. So that's the third, aspect of this kind of work. Tech law and policy is an area where there is a lot of such interesting new organizations out there. Then you have think tanks, which work on these areas, but largely from a research point of view, looking at competition law, data protection, and so on. Uh, Finally, of course, you have academia to teach this area. There aren't too many teachers, there aren't too many subjects, courses being offered in this area. So that's a wonderful opportunity for those who want to get into academia to get early on into data protection and privacy. That's again a very good opportunity to build a career in this space. Thank you.